Hi, everyone. Amy Collins here from New Shelves Books, and you are listening to a very special edition of Free Advice Friday. For those of you who have signed up to watch this webinar live, I hope you've got your pens and pencils out and you're ready to go because we are actually broadcasting Free Advice Friday all week. We're going to have this up ready to go at newshelves.com/Chilton. But this event, which will also become a podcast that goes up on Friday, I am thrilled to be interviewing Mr. David Chilton. I met Mr. Chilton a few years ago. We were just laughing. It's more years than either one of us will admit. Back when I worked for Prima Publishing, and he, as you may know, is the powerhouse name behind Wealthy Barber, the follow-up book for the Wealthy Barber, but many others. You've started a publishing imprint of your own. He is also known as being one of the foremost names behind the Dragon Den, excuse me. And for those of you in the U.S. who are not familiar with the Dragon Den, it is actually the parent of Shark Tank. They're the ones that spawned Shark Tank. It's the Canadian version, as it were. David, thank you so much for joining us today and answering all these questions that my authors have been sending in. They've been sending in tons.
No, it's great to see. It really is, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited. I still love book marketing. After all these years, it's probably the area of my business life I most enjoy.
Great. Well, what else are you doing besides bookmark? What is stuff you don't like? What are you doing besides?
Well, I like it all. I just like it in varying degrees, but I'm lucky to be involved in a lot of businesses through Dragon's Den. Much like Shark's Tank, you get invested in 20 to 30 private companies, and you're helping them out a lot. And I've got a new company that's in high-end collectibles, and I'm involved soon in an artificial intelligence company that looks like it's going to be focusing on sports betting. So I'm involved in all kinds of arenas, but I think the one thing I know best is book marketing. For whatever reason, my intuition was strong there when I first started out 25 years ago. I loved experimenting, and we loved doing all the testing we did that led us to a lot of the results we were able to achieve. And it's a fun and dynamic field, and it bothers me, and I think you would agree that people think it's impossible to do nowadays because of the internet and because of all the competition. That couldn't be further from the truth. There's all kinds of books that are excelling in this environment. In fact, in the last couple of years, you've seen a lot of nonfiction books prosper. People have gone back to books as curated material. As the internet overwhelms them with information, they head back to books. And I think the word of mouth can still help books more than anything else. I love the whole field.
Oh, I'm thrilled to hear that. That's exactly how we feel here, the exact same way. Libraries, if you had asked me a few years ago about libraries, I would have told you they were dead. Nothing dies in this industry. Everything comes back around. So
it's so true.
you know what else comes back around, though? Advice about how to market books. Things have changed, though, with the internet. I tell people all the time we're in a golden age, but it's a golden age that freaks people out a little bit. There's a lot happening. There's a lot going on. So we've got a whole bunch of new tools. We have new opportunities, but we also have a lot of bad advice out there. I get a couple of emails a day from people who say, Amy, I heard that I need to, I don't know, dye my hair pink and get a YouTube channel and do makeup tutorials if I want to sell my book. So, and I get very frustrated. There are some tried and true bits of advice out there, but more and more as things shift, some of the old advice doesn't work anymore. So I'm curious. I know the things that I'm not loving that I'm hearing about, when I hear people talk about how they can just sell on Amazon, or some of the things that was a few years ago, you could make a killing just selling on Amazon. That's really no longer true. So I'm curious, have you heard things from authors that you believe is no longer valid advice, or have you heard any tips that you would discount for us?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that jumps at us is all the authors that get in touch with us and believe that to succeed, they have to build a big platform with all kinds of followers. And they set out to do that. And frankly, that's a more difficult thing to do than to sell a lot of books. They're better off to sell the books first to build the following than the other way around. And you've got so many consultants out there saying, well, we can help you to draw so many people to your Facebook page and so on and so forth. And certainly some of that's very possible. But the best way to do it again is to have a successful book. And sometimes that, interestingly, goes all the way back to the old-fashioned techniques of just doing a lot of interviews, whether they're radio podcast interviews now are gold. The podcast listener is the book buyer. Often the audiobook, in fact, even self-publishers now have to consider putting out an audiobook version, especially if you're selling to the millennial set or the male set. Those two sets are leaning more and more towards audiobooks. But in general, building a platform is exceptionally difficult. It's often easier to find people who have a platform already with the same target audience coming to it that you want to be listening to your book or reading your book and partner with them in some way, shape, or form. I think that's what we've always been good at, is striking partnerships, looking for win-win opportunities. Again, building a platform from scratch, that takes years.
Yeah. Wow. Great. Now, these podcasts and some of these platforms that you're talking about, not actually going out and building a platform for the sake of building a platform, but actually having a book that sells in beginning. Where are some of your favorite places to sell books?
Well, as I mentioned, we love podcasts. I mean, they've been amazingly good to us. And it's funny because even podcasts with very few listeners. So let's say you've got a podcast that only registers 7, 8, 9,000 listeners. That's relatively small. They can be outstanding because not only do you have listeners who are likely book buyers, but they tend to be outstanding networkers. They're the most fanatical about that particular subject area in nonfiction. They're the ones most likely involved in the other parts of the community. They're the ones going to the conferences. They're the ones word of mouthing the book. So to get involved with all those influencers, an overused word, it really can make a difference. So I think podcast is one of the great places to start. Going back many, many years, I still believe in radio. It's a myth that radio is dying. It's not. It's down 7 to 10%, depending on what figures you look at. Many radio stations and many radio shows are up in terms of listeners because of all the political challenges and all the political uproar in the States. You've got people tuning in now, especially as they're commuting, and people are always going to commute. Radio is a great way to sell books. Again, the radio listener and the book buyer have a tremendous crossover. I'm always amazed how few authors take advantage of radio. You can do it from the comfort of your own home, for heaven's sakes. There's no cost in terms of being there. And they're looking for interviewees all the time. And the thing I like most about radio, if you're good at it, they have you back over and over and over again. Radio stations that I've done 10, 15, 20 interviews on. So I think radio is too often ignored. Those two, radios and podcasts, interviews alone, have driven a lot of book successes in the last 2 and 3 years.
David, I have to tell you, I'm one of the guilty parties. I have actually gone on record as saying somewhat recently that radio, so I'm guilty of giving bad advice because I've actually said to authors that radio listeners and readers are not the same. That readers...
No, there honestly is a very big crossover according to the research between the radio listener and the book reader. Although again, audiobooks are often coming more and more into play. It's interesting in the last 12 months, how many self-publishers I've spoken to who've decided to put out an audiobook. Because again, if they're trying to sell to the millennial set, you better put one out. And people like the fact that the audiobook lets you multitask. You can listen to it while you're exercising. You can listen to it while you clean the house. You can listen to it while you walk. You can't do that with a conventional book, of course. Or you can listen to it in your car, which may hurt radio listenership overall because podcasts are starting to take over a lot of the vehicle listeners. But you've got to get involved in audiobooks at some point if you really want to hit those target demographics.
You have to get involved in audiobooks regardless. Down here in the States, I can't speak for Canada, but the Book Industry Study Group down here in the States has told us that last year, the income that came in from audiobooks was almost just under 28% of our industry's income last year. 28%.
Yeah, and it's growing dramatically. And I would argue, Amy, that it's even bigger for certain nonfiction books. And so again, go back to what I said a few moments ago. If your target audience is males are reading fewer and fewer nonfiction books. You've got to hit them with audiobooks. It's interesting, all the research coming back on male readers. They like shorter books now instead of longer books. They like shorter chapters instead of longer chapters. This research is robust. Give it to them. Listen to the marketplace. If you're writing a nonfiction book where you want males to be a big part of your audience, don't fight the market. Give them what they want. They want shorter books, shorter chapters, and they want the audiobook option when at all possible.
Wow. Okay. Well, for those of you who I have shooed you off of radio, I'm sorry, and I will fix it. I will make amends. I was wrong. All right. Now, David, let me ask you this next question. Audiobooks sound to be very, very important. Focusing, now you're talking, and your expertise is in the nonfiction world. Although I do know, I've spent a lot of time on your website, and the Chilton method, which is something you're kind of known for. You're known for being a very generous advice giver. So we're about to delve into that because you're known for giving away most of your knowledge and
stupidly. Well, I've been lucky to do really well, in other areas. And what happened to me was, I think I was mentioning on the course itself, I get thousands of calls a year from authors because so many people self-publish now. And we honestly returned every call. Like Maureen, my assistant's in the office right now, but you can't keep up after a while. So I created the course that you're talking about now, and I make no money from it. How many people come on and make literally not a penny from it? I donated all the material to the production company, and I want to get out there and try to help and point people in the right direction for all of this because there is a lot to learn. And most of this stuff is not that tricky. I'm not that sharp. Like, trust me, I hang around me all the time. I am not that sharp. But we've tested all of these ideas. We try a lot of things. Many fail. but we've learned over the years there are patterns to what works. Let me give you one example about the kind of thing that I'm shocked you don't see authors, major publishers do. We get a lot of interviews, whether it's radio, whether it's TV, whether it's podcast, through a very simple technique. We get producers on shows who've already been on to write testimonials about what great interviews we give. Much, much more impactful in terms of generating future interviews than book reviews. Remember, they're not interviewing the book. They're interviewing the author. They want to know the author has command of the language. They want to know the author is charismatic. They want to know the author can use humor. The author can hold the audience. In this attention deficit society, you have to be able to command people's attention. Well, what better proof of that can you have than other producers saying, this man or this woman is wonderful? Almost nobody does that. We think it's one of the most successful things we've ever done. We put it at the top of our kits. You wouldn't believe, by the way, Amy, how brief our kits are when we get in touch with podcasts and radio stations. We have oftentimes the producers' testimonials, 4 or 5 producers saying what a phenomenal interview we are, a handwritten note, and then we have sample questions and the book, and that's it. No press release, nothing. And I would argue that our return rate, our acceptance rate, our booking rate is higher than anybody else's in the industry. Because
and
the proof is in the
out,
pudding.
you post or you send these out electronically?
We send them out both. We actually have found, surprisingly, that the physical kits still tend to lead to higher booking numbers. Because there's so much stuff coming in electronically gets lost in the shuffle. So few people now are sending kits because it's expensive, because there's a perception they don't work. So few people are sending them now, and it actually does work. We often send them in a very bright green envelope or a bright red envelope, something that stands out and makes the receiver want to open it. Or if they don't open it, we can phone them and say it's the bright green envelope. They go, oh, that one. And they open it up. And again, we're not giving them too much. When it comes to book marketing, so often less is more. Don't want to overwhelm people. Too many people are sending out big kits that will never be read. But we've had a lot of success with electronic too. But going back to the original idea, producer testimonials are one of the most impactful things you can do. And we see almost nobody else doing it.
As you're listening to this, especially if you're listening to it as a replay, you'll see the URL right there at the bottom of the screen. If you go to newshelves.com/Chilton, it's going to take you right to Dave's website. Do you prefer Dave or David?
I like Jack. Makes me sound like a movie star, but go with Dave. Dave is fine. Dave is fine.
I'm going to call him Schnookums.
I like that. That's very good.
If you go to newshelves.com/Chilton, it's going to take you to Dave's website where you can see, I mean, this advice that he's giving, he's actually put together some wonderful little videos that you can just watch. Just go to his site after this interview, because I have a lot of questions to ask him, including, we had told everyone that you were going to come on and help us out with 2019. It's a little late to be worried about Christmas. And truthfully, you're not focused on the retail marketplace anyway. You are known for being a guy who gets corporate sales, large scale industrial sales. I want to talk to you about that. But you were just talking about putting kits together. And some of the advice that you've heard is that radio's no good. Clearly, that's not true. You've also heard in the past that putting together physical kits is a waste of time. You have not found that. So,
no, in fact, I would actually argue the evidence, interestingly, is a little bit the opposite. That physical kits for the probably 30 or 40 people we've had test them in the last few years have still outpulled electronic kits. But remember, there's an expense to them.
yes.
And so it has to outpull them by enough to offset the expense. Usually it does. And so it tends to be a very good move. The problem's not the physical kit. It's that the kit's not well put together. Oftentimes the kit involves, again, too much material. The material doesn't pull the reader in. That's why I like the producer's testimonials. It gets right to the point. This guy is a great interview. You want to have him on your show. Betsy Ross, WKSS. And people go, okay, I believe her. I know her. And their peers saying that. So it's a great lead sheet in there. And same with sample questions. Make them intriguing enough where the person receiving it thinks, yes, that's what my audience wants to know. More people should put more time into sample questions. They're a very big part of all of the marketing. Now, again, I'm not against electronic kits. In fact, we've had a lot of success with them, but I think both have their place.
All right. So 2019, it sounds like people putting together a podcast plan, putting together a radio outreach campaign plan. But what are a few of the other things that if you had an author you liked walk up to you at a cocktail party and ask you to quickly just help them out with a couple of ideas for 2019, simple bits of advice, what are some of the things that you would tell him or her to do for next year?
Well, I'll give you an interesting one, a little bit of a twist on one you hear a lot. We've had a lot of authors over the last 2 to 3 years reach out to people in their space, people who have existing platforms, and send them a book. But they don't ask for anything in return. They don't ask them to mention it to their viewers, their listeners, their followers, nothing. They just say, I'm a fan, I've enjoyed your work over the years, here's a signed copy of my book, and they send it out. That has been much more impactful on a return basis than actually sending it out requiring something in return, hoping for reciprocity. I think in general, people like the soft sell. They're more likely to look at the book when they think of it as a gift in terms of, or instead of a bribe. And we've seen a lot of people do well, because that's one great thing is nowadays, everybody out there that's an influencer has a platform. The potential for word of mouth is enormous. In fact, you said earlier, this is a golden time for book marketing. And I think you're right in a lot of ways. Even though it's a highly competitive landscape, and even though the media is much more fragmented than it once was, so many people have ways to spread word of mouth that if you write a truly wonderful book, you have better odds than ever. Now, again, the key point is truly wonderful. And what we're seeing over and over again now is average books are scuffling. The day of the average book selling 5, 7, 9,000 copies, that day is probably over, to be perfectly honest. But really good books do exceptionally well because Harry tells Mary, tells Larry, tells Terry, and off you go. And they now have platforms and ways to connect to be able to do that. So, I mean, it sounds corny, but the best of all book marketing ideas is still write a great book. And obviously everything from the title to the subtitle, all those little things matter. I mean, we talked, I think, off air quickly about some of the videos about why you would never put your acknowledgments at the front of a book. That is a mistake. You never put your acknowledgments at the front of a book. And I go through why. All those little things together add up. Most people's dedication is horrible.
Oh.
As the reader, the dedication is a great opportunity to emotionally connect with the reader, to pull them in some way. One of the ones I remember, it was my fondest memories. We had a guy send us off one. He said, this book is dedicated to my 2 wives I pray you never meet. Well, that automatically is going to make you laugh and pull you in. That's the way you want to use a dedication. You put the acknowledgments at the back because they're boring. The reader doesn't care about them. All of these little things added together make the book wonderful. Why does it matter when people have already bought it? Word of mouth. Okay, it's all about word of mouth. That's what really spreads books and gets them firing on all cylinders.
Well, and for those of you who have listened to me before, you know that I am obsessed with data and with documenting the data. And Verso Digital does a study every year, and I absolutely adore their annual results that comes out every March. And the last study showed that 82% of new book purchases that had happened the previous year happened because of personal recommendations and word of mouth. 82%.
Amy, I don't know if you can make it, like I'm supposed to be making the most important point, but you just did. Because that's exactly right. And I'll tell you where else you can get that without even looking at the Verso numbers is go to a bookstore and when the people are in a long line of a Christmas, ask each of them where they heard about the book they're about to buy. And it's the same thing. Between 70 and 80% had it personally recommended. Now, interestingly, they now count personal recommendations not just from friends, but from people they trust and follow online.
Yes.
And so if a podcaster says buy such and such a book, they tend to go out and buy it. That's why you need those centers of influence, hopefully recommending your book in some way. Interestingly, some of the research recently says that it's more impactful for your book sales for, say, a good podcast host to say, hey, you should buy The Wealthy Barber, than it is for you to do an interview on that same podcast. Just that simple, you should buy, actually impacts more people than a full interview. I think that's interesting. And so you're always looking for those mentions. But those numbers you gave are absolutely crucial to understand. And you can't get those kinds of recommendations unless you write a very good book.
And it's well edited, well designed, well laid out, and you spent the time and energy learning about this industry. It's not enough to have written a good book. You have to publish a good book. And I'm afraid writing a good book is hard. It is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but publishing a good book is not difficult. Writing a good book is the hard part. Anyone can publish a good book if they've got good material, because there's a very simple set of tools. There's good editors out there, good designers. You know that you've got the library CIP block for David, not in Canada.
Yes.
But
no, we have it too, yeah.
There are rules, and if you follow the rules, you can publish a good book. Now, we have a question from one of our right online right now. Brian is asking, and I kind of snarkily answered him already, so sorry, Brian, but he wants to know, what do you send out in a kit when you want to send out a physical kit or electronic if you don't have any endorsements or testimonials yet?
Well, I push this very aggressively in the course. We have never gone with press releases, and it's not because we're opposed to them. It's because they never tested nearly as well as us just writing an informal letter. And I go through the course in great detail about how an informal letter, professionally written but informal, written in very short block paragraphs with a punchy PS, that's always been our most impactful thing. And what we're trying to do is position the book to intrigue the listeners. So if it's a radio station, if it's a podcast, if it's a TV show, the viewers, we want to make sure that the producer's thinking, yes, this is what my listeners and viewers will want to hear. So we're very good at weaving sample questions right into those blocks. But again, it's short, it's punchy, it's casual, but professional. But it is not a release. We never do well with the releases relative to the letters. We often handwrite something at the bottom because it stands out. And the PS is very important, all those things. Now, if you're using an electronic send out, you've got to have an excellent subject line, because the subject line dictates whether or not they're going to move on. And so you have to do some research on how to do that. We've got a number of tips in the course. There's some excellent copywriting books out there, but it's very difficult. That's one thing I like about the kits. Send a bright kit, people love the book. They know there's a physical book in the kit. It's weighty, something they can actually touch. Reciprocity is more likely to kick in. But there's a lot of parts of the physical kit that I'm still drawn to, despite the fact it's more expensive.
All right. 2019 is quickly approaching. I'm about to spend all my time going after podcasts and radio, and there's also some key bloggers that I love.
For sure.
I'm going to go to the ones that I've already been on, and I'm going to ask them if they'd be willing to give me a testimonial, if they'd be willing to send me a short response to how it was having me as a guest. I'm keeping it simple. I'm just going to send them a quick email. I'm going to do away with press releases as part of my kit, because I want to shrink my kit, make it as short and as little and impactful as possible.
Yes.
Now, that's all about getting media and media attention and word of mouth, and that's important. But I'm kind of focused my business on sales and distribution, and I'm all about bookstores and libraries. But you know what I know about you, because I've been watching your interviews. Again, guys, you have to check out his site. But I've been watching your interviews, and you talk a lot about industry and corporate sales. And I've never even thought about that, and I'm a little embarrassed, almost as embarrassed as I am about telling people not to get on the radio. Tell me a little bit about how that works, and how people might be able to launch that next year.
Well, that's the golden spot in self-publishing. It really is corporate sales, especially for nonfiction, but even fiction lately, we've seen a number of huge sales. And since the course came out, for example, we've had a number of people take it and sell tens of thousands of books. I mean, these things are very possible. How you do it is you've just got to find somebody who has aligned interests, or maybe just aligned target demographics, and you go out and you make it happen. So just to borrow from another industry, my son had one of the better ideas I've ever seen. He came to me a few years ago when the Wealthy Barber returns came out. And he said, Dad, what about this? We'll go with the Netflix model. So instead of charging per unit, let's go to one of the big financial institutions. We'll charge them a flat fee for unlimited downloads of the electronic version of the Wealthy Barber returns. And I initially said, well, no, I don't want to do that, because they could download 1 million or something, and they're only paying me a flat fee. And he came back to me a few weeks later and said, they might download 1 million because I've given them a 2 million cap in Canada, but they're paying $450,000. Well, we had no cost of goods sold. We had no shipping costs. We had no nothing. That $450,000 goes straight to the bottom line. Since then, we've been able to
have people talking about your book. You now have
absolutely
that word of mouth growing.
Not only do you have the word of mouth growing, but interestingly, a lot of people who got the electronic copy of the book go out and buy the physical copy of the book after as a gift for someone else, or because they want a physical copy themselves. It lays the foundation for awareness that spreads in all kinds of very positive ways. But there's so many ways to use things like that. Look at all the online firms out there trying to market awareness. So you look at Shopify. Shopify is trying to get at the entrepreneur set, and they're doing anything they can to market them. Well, if you have a book that appeals to entrepreneurs, you go to Shopify and say, I'll give you the electronic version. You give me $10,000, and everybody who signs up for Shopify gets a free copy. You draw more people in. I get awareness among my target.
I gotta write that down. Hold on. I'm right. Let's see. Shopify. No.
But there's an unlimited number of those opportunities for electronic books, but for physical books too. You were talking about distribution. We've done unusually well putting our physical books into very, very odd situations. The Wealthy Barber sold well at barbershops. But here's one of the funniest ones, is I produced a cookbook called Looney Spoons. And I noticed that it was women loving it, and they were talking about it at hair salons. People kept telling me that. And so I sold it to hair salons. Mm-hmm. And when I first went to a hair salon with the idea, they said, there's no way. So I got one of the distributors who services that arena to put sample copies in, 6, 7, 8 sample copies into a number of them. They all sold through quickly. We ended up selling thousands and thousands of copies. We've sold books to Avon. We've sold books all over the place. All you have to do is find a distribution channel that deals with the same customer you do. You don't have to necessarily find one that deals in the same space you do. You have to deal with the same customer you do. And bookstore distribution, we've done very well. We've managed to place a lot of books at Costco. And people say, well, you can't get self-published books in Costco. We've had 6 out of 6 in Costco.
Exactly.
There's lots of self-published in Costco. In fact, I think Costco is very fair to deal with on the self-published front. All they care about is the book going to sell through? You have to get them excited about, yes, it is, and here's how it is.
David, there's a lot of people right now listening to this interview saying to themselves, well, that's easy for David Chilton to say. But I'm not him. I don't have the background. I don't have the pedigree. Tell me, what are some of the things specifically that anyone can do to get started in this process? I know that you cover it in your videos, and I'm hoping
but the key point is, because you're making a fair argument, and there's no doubt that I've had a cumulative advantage because of my brand awareness and TV appearances. Later deals became much easier. But remember, when I started out, when I first met you, nobody'd heard of me. I ended up getting the PBS show and that kind of thing. But at the early days, nobody had heard of me. And I had to do all these things from scratch. And we sold 1 million to 2 million books before any of the TV shows came along. And you're still grinding it out. Janet and Greta Podleski have sold millions of cookbooks. Nobody had heard of them. And they struck that deal with Diet Coke, one of the biggest companies in the world, where they went on 5.5 million cases of Diet Coke in 2-liter bottles. So the possibilities are there. One of the things I would urge all the viewers right now to do is you have to have, it sounds old-fashioned and corny, you have to have some grit. You really do. You are going to face rejection in any of these things you're pursuing, whether it be interviews, podcast appearances, special sales. You're playing the numbers game to some extent. And so you're trying to get a number of irons in the fire, hoping that some work out, knowing that many won't. That requires having, again, some fortitude, having the time to put it together. But it's not take 8 hours a day. It's not like that at all. You're not following these up 4 and 5 and 6 hours a day. You're putting a few kits out here and there. I think the old rule that we used to talk about in this industry all the time is try to get 5 things out a day, whether it's follow-up phone calls or kits or electronic kits. You get 5 out a day, and suddenly at the end of the month, that's 100 plus kits. That's 100 plus irons in the fire. That's 100 plus things you're following up. If you have a good book, I guarantee you good things will happen.
All right. Well, David, you've been amazing. I've got a couple more questions I'm going to ask you. We do have to finish up because David was very kind to give us an amount of time, but I want to be respectful of your time. But you just talked about Coca-Cola, you talked about barbershops, you talked about hairdressing, you just talked about a lot of industries. You are out there so deeper than just the traditional publishing industry. Is there anything that you've been seeing out there in other industries that you think could teach us a thing or two back here in the book world? Anything you're seeing out there that we might be able to learn from?
Well, I think you're seeing more people trying to tempt the marketplace with free samples, in essence. And I think with books, physical excerpts or electronic excerpts given away for free to your target audience is a very interesting way to go. So let's go back to our Shopify example of just moments ago. Shopify, of course, is the dominant player now in terms of providing a platform for people who want to retail whatever. And so they're after the entrepreneur. They're after the small retailer. So you go to them because you have a book on being an entrepreneur and you say, I will give you 3 sample chapters electronically, and you can give them to all of your clients as a gift. And it's a nice way for you to ingratiate yourself with them. It's a nice way for you to help them to help their businesses to prosper. But from your selfish perspective, now you have hundreds of thousands of people with 3 chapters of your book in their hands. And they are going to word of mouth it. More important, they're going to want the rest of the book if it's good. They're going to want the physical copy, etc. Because of the electronic world now, there's no cost of goods sold. There's no distribution costs. Taking advantage of that, getting samples out into people's hands is an absolutely vital part of spreading your brand. I'd put a lot more focus on that, frankly, than building my Facebook page, because I think the impact of all those types of things is much bigger. Again, you gain the awareness, you gain the credibility, then you get the followers. Too many people are trying to do it the opposite way. They're trying to get followers to get the credibility. Oftentimes that'll happen slowly, organically, almost by accident. But by design, you don't see that many people have success doing it. I laugh at some of the books out there on book marketing talking about, well, this person built a platform. They're always giving the same examples. The books have been coming out over 5 and 10 years. We're still using the same examples. It's tough building a following. Get out there, sell books, use your books as your business card. Use it as your credibility builder. Get the interviews, spread the word. All those types of things lead to all kinds of opportunities.
Oh, David, marry me. You are reading my diary. I love this. Reese and a couple people have asked some questions, which I can encapsulate into one final question. And
sure.
Again, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time today.
Well, I've enjoyed it.
Guys, can you all see, and I'm going to put it in the chat box, newshelves.com/Chilton. You have got to go check out his page. There will be within an hour or two a replay of this video at newshelves.com/Chilton, and I will keep it up through Sunday. I will then post it as part of Free Advice Friday. But David is offering a deal on these videos and these classes, this course that he's set, which is the Chilton Method, right?
The Chilton Method, that's right. Yep.
David is offering you guys quite a deal. It's very inexpensive to be able to have access to all of his classes. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of hours I've been watching. It's amazing the amount of time that he's giving and advice that he's giving. But the big question, including Reese and Sylvie and some of the people who are out there asking, I think we can pull it into this. David, it's true. You're part of just a two-person company, correct?
I am, and my assistant Maureen is behind the screen somewhere. Yes,
All
she's
right.
here.
Hi, Marie. So, a lot of people, besides saying, oh, well, it's easy for, but one of the things that I'd love to hear from you is how, if you've got just two people, and the thing that you're the most focused on is corporate sales, you're focused on industry, you're pushing your marketing. Do you outsource any of this? Do you do most of it in-house? Kind of what is your opinion on hiring a PR company or hiring someone to do these for you? Do you have a particular philosophy about?
We've done it ourselves. I mean, but that's not for everybody because we do this full time. And over the years, Janet and Greta, and then they came to work for us on the cookbook, did it themselves too. But I think some people realistically can't. They've got full-time jobs. They've got too many other things to do. I do, by the way, I do often feel that PR firms don't come through to the level of their costs and that you may have to take control of a lot of your PR yourself. There's certainly exceptions. I don't want to paint everybody with one brush, but a lot of them are very expensive and the value add isn't what it needs to be to justify it. Some are very good. But for the most part, I like controlling. You're going to laugh. People always ask us what software we use. Then they come into our office and we have index cards posted all over the place because I still have not come up with anything better than walls full of index cards where you can see exactly what you're trying to do. You've got the media effort you're putting in. You've got the special sales effort. Exactly. And whiteboards. Like you tell me something better than a whiteboard that the digital world has come up with? Nothing. Because you can see it in big picture, what you're trying to achieve, what strategies you're trying to implement out there. This is fun stuff. Like to some extent, this is a game. And you're really trying to put all the pieces together. But the one thing I want to drive home to finish up is that I don't mean to sound like a motivational speaker here, but it's very true in the book marketing industry, more so than any industry I've been involved in. Success begets success. You keep fighting because every time something good happens, it makes the next thing much easier to achieve. So when you get that one big interview, then all of a sudden getting the next interview is much easier. When the second one falls in, now you've got credibility and momentum. You've established that you're getting the producer testimonials. When you get a corporate sale with somebody, then your next client you can tell, well, we've already dealt with IBM, and that opens up the doors. That takes away that filter of fear you have. You keep grinding in this industry because the first couple things, I admit, are very difficult to get through. But when you get through them, you have an exponential curve. Everything gets easier and big things start happening. Plus, you're laying that foundation of having more books in the marketplace for word of mouth. So those two things combine together, and all of a sudden what looked like a slow starter a year or two in is suddenly going very, very well.
David, thank you for your time. Thank you for your generosity. Also, the Chilton Method, thank you for letting me watch those videos. I have learned
I'm glad you enjoyed.
So much. Guys, 50% of what I am going to be doing in 2019 came directly from what I watched on the Chilton Method. I am changing up and shifting up a lot of my focus in the next year. And I strongly encourage you to go to newshelves.com/Chilton. It's going to take you right to the Chilton Method and just take a look at some of the videos. Take a look at what David has put out there. It has literally changed my life and my business just in the last few weeks, getting to know his classes and his advice. And David, thank you for spending time with us. And I look forward to seeing you in 2019. Guys.
Yeah, hopefully it won't be 25 years again because I will not be looking good at all. Good seeing you too, Amy.
Good. Guys, have a wonderful holiday season. If I don't talk to you, thank you for joining me here at New Shelves. And for those of you who are watching this as part of Free Advice Friday, I'll see you next Friday. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.